Hello and welcome to You Don't Play Boxing, Mirror Fighting's Influencer Boxing podcast. I am your host, Martin Dom, and joined again by Donna Corby and Harry Davies in different rooms this time, unfortunately. I hope the friendship still exists, even if you're in different countries. Today we are going to look back at that Dublin Kingpyn event, which did go ahead and did give us two finals for later on this year. AnEsonGib will take on King Kenny in the men's event, and Julie Pocket will take on Barbie in the women's event, meaning no Brooke Sisters final. But I think everyone who watched the fights last weekend would agree that the four finalists were the right finalists. It's almost a week on. Donna, can you just give us your reflections on the event?
The Kingpyn for getting it over the line. It was a difficult week leading up, but they did fantastically. Chris Boyne, shout out. He stepped in front of the cameras this week, spoke to the media, was very open about everything that had happened, and kind of emerged as one of the new promoters in the scene, a little rival to Mams Taylor. And in terms of the event, a home run, packed out 3 arena. The local fighters delivered, and we got, at the end of the day, a fantastic show.
How did it feel? It's very different covering those events as opposed to maybe a professional boxing event. How was it on the night?
Yeah, it was certainly a little bit different. No press row, not quite the setup that you're used to at professional boxing. It was kind of fly by the seat of your pants type of a situation, but it was a lot of fun. Like I say, the crowd was crazy. I actually spent a lot of time backstage. It's probably better to ask Harry, what the feeling was like in the arena, because, I was, behind the scenes trying to make things work backstage. But yeah, it was, for as much of it as I was there for, which was, I believe, Kiefer Crosby. I think I might have saw Ben Williams for a bit as well. But yeah, Kiefer Crosby, Cian Cowley, and then, of course, Whindersson Nunes in the main event I saw in the flesh. And that crowd was rowdy. So yeah, it was completely different. We were in amongst the fans. Perhaps that was not a super popular decision with some media members, but we got to feel the crowd atmosphere, and yeah, it was an interesting one to cover for sure. Very different to professional boxing.
Yeah, I'll just chime in with the crowd thing. So we sort of turned up when the arrivals happened, and there's always that sort of dreaded feeling like, right, where are we going to be sat? And to be fair, not to bash Kingpyn, because the access for post-fight interviews is pretty good. They'd bring the fighters back as soon as they've completed their sort of post-fight medicals, whatever, and then there was good chance for interviews. But yeah, I sort of turned up and I thought, right, well, where can I sit? And it was weird when me and Donna turned up. You had sort of an allocated ticket as well as your press pass. So I just thought, well, let's just post up as front row as I can. And luckily enough, I was able to sort of scoot my way in after the fights to get some fighters leaving the cage. And one of those that did very well on TikTok was probably the star of the show, in Daniela Helmsy. So if you've not seen that, you can go over to our Mirror Fighting TikTok. So a bit of a unusual thank you to Daniela for that one, because again, she sort of caught the moment, and I think she said she even spoke with Chris Boyne, who's a promoter for Kingpyn, of almost having permission to do that after. So, but I'm not sure they quite thought it would get the attention that it received online. So,
what Harry's not saying here is that she flashed the crowd. If anyone hasn't seen it, he's been very diplomatic. And as you'd expect, it was an incident, let's say, which sparked debate. Eddie Hearn, if we remember, we've just lost Donna. Eddie Hearn, if we remember, the man who put on Jake Paul's first fight against Gib, indeed. He then put on Logan Paul against KSI, the second fight under professional rules. So not a man who is without history in this space, but came out and said that's everything that's wrong with it. It's disgusting. I never want to be involved in it, etc., etc. And I see the point from a women's boxing perspective. You look at people like Katie Taylor, Natasha Jonas over here, and Clarissa Shields, Savannah Marshall, who have really built the sport. And then you have something like we had last weekend. But was it as bad as Eddie and others said, or was it just a little bit of fun? Bearing in mind she's a TikTok star, she's not a boxer.
Well, it's sort of, again, like you said, drawing the comparisons with boxing. We need to separate the two, and let's be clear with influencer boxing as a whole. There's bona fide porn stars competing in this, and when you have that sort of category competing in influencer boxing, this sort of comes part and parcel with it, and you have to accept that. And I think that's the biggest thing to separate is let's not sort of put Daniela Helmsley's label on the whole of women's boxing, because there is a very, very big difference between what she's doing and the likes of, like you said, Savannah and stuff there. So I feel like it's a hard line to cross in influencer boxing because it's so young. There's no real boundary set of what isn't acceptable. But look, I mean, it was probably one of the most talked about things on the Saturday night. So I guess maybe for all the wrong reasons you could say, but if it's being talked about, any sort of press is usually good press for these promoters.
Oh, it's definitely good for them, no doubt about it. And I'm sure if they can get her back on the card in September or whenever they're going to do the final, then they will. And I think you're right. You do just have to accept that that's the kind of thing that will come with the territory. And if you don't, I mean, it was on DAZN, but there was also Josh Kelly was fighting on Saturday night on DAZN as well. There were other, there are other fights you can watch if you don't want to indulge Kingpyn or Misfits or anyone else. Let's focus on the semi-finals themselves. As I said, pretty comprehensive. Start with the women. Julie Pocker beat Elle Brooke and Barbie beat Emily Brooke. Both sisters initially were going to fight, I believe, in a loser's bracket later on this year, but Elle has now come out and said that's just not happening. So a mixed night for the Brazilians, but Julie Pocker goes through, which presumably means that the crowd, looks like in London at the O2 in September, will be a good one for her and for the event organisers. But as I said, the right result in the end, Harry?
Yeah, I think Julie did surprise a lot of people because obviously, Elle's in this sort of short space of influencer boxing has been one of the most veteran female competitors, and then Julie comes in and she's this big muscular girl and we didn't really know how her gas tank would hold up, and she looked really good against Elle. I know a lot of people calling it one of the best female influencer boxing fights ever, and certainly from ringside it did look that way. It was a great back and forth, and even after that she had a face off with Barbie, the next challenger for her. But I feel like it was obviously the right decision. Maybe there could have been a bit of favoritism for Elle because she's obviously the more popular one, especially UK wise, but I know the Brazilian fans in attendance would have had something to say about that. But Julie, I did think, surprised a lot of people on the night, and it was a great win for her.
And Donna, just on the second semi-final, we know Emily Brooke had hardly been boxing, but again, Barbie, impressed.
Yeah, I think Barbie is what she has at her advantage is she's so much bigger than these other girls. I mean, the face-off was wild. She had the big boots on to make her look even bigger, but it was completely like a mismatch size-wise. She was telling, she was even saying at the open workout she almost had a wardrobe malfunction because she'd lost so much weight that the top she'd been wearing to train was too small for her now, and that was a problem for her. So in standard fighting you would call her a weight bully almost. She's obviously got herself down to a weight that's very unfair on the other girls, so she's going to be a massive favorite, pardon the pun, for the final. And I think she's look, boxing ability wise she didn't show us a great deal. She was kind of swinging her arms wildly like a beginner early on, but eventually she got into it and got behind her jab, and she just like that old phrase, like too big too strong. It's like, yeah, at this level that's what you need is to be that something, an advantage as massive as that is going to be really hard to overcome for someone who's only been boxing 6 months, even a year. Like Elle Brooke would have struggled with her, and Elle Brooke's been boxing about 2 years at this stage, and I think Julie Pocker will struggle with her as well, even though Julie's a strong girl. But I didn't see anything in her fight with Elle Brooke that says like she's going to be really great at coming in on the inside and winging over punches. Like we did see that Emily had a bit of success, so it's not out of the question that she could be beaten. And I know that the size difference isn't always everything, but it is, like, at this level it's absolutely massive.
So you fancy Barbie for the final?
A lot of people fancy Barbie, apparently. That's what I found out this week. Was, believe it or not, she's pretty popular. And for the final, yeah, I would think I guess she has proven in the last two fights that that she's the one to watch.
I just wanted to chime in with what Donna was saying, and it seems like with the final of Barbie and Julie, you've almost got two of the most evenly matched in terms of, obviously Barbie is a tall girl, but you look at Julie and Barbie weight wise, it's pretty even. When you look at Elle, what she was saying is she didn't want to fight Emily because she wants to lose some weight and go back to her actual natural weight class. I believe when she fought AJ Bunker this time last year, she was almost about 10 kilos lighter than she had to weigh in at the 140 pound bracket for this. And when you look at Julie, she's obviously got the muscles. When you look at Barbie, she's got the height, whereas Elle and Emily were sort of almost undersized for this, and that sort of shown in their semi-final fights. And going on to the final, I think the thing that almost excites people with this Julie and Barbie matchup is you've got, you know, the height of Barbie, but the sheer sort of brute force of Julie, and I feel like it's going to make for more of an evenly fight than the semi-finals were.
I think, Donna, we're looking at the O2 in September in London. Is that what you believe? And we've talked at length about how the semi-finals almost didn't happen. Is it a confidence that those issues will not arise again in the next couple of months?
I think that from what I've heard, DAZN are taking a pretty vested interest in this. Misfits have obviously moved their schedule around, so they had a lot of shows planned. They had Berlin planned. It's been moved. They had obviously this Nashville show that we're going to talk about this weekend was supposed to be weeks ago, over a month ago at this point. So they've moved their schedule around. I mean, this final is second only to KSI versus Tommy or KSI versus Jake in terms of its significance to the scene. So I would think that DAZN are going to push and make sure that this thing happens. It was funny, you know, speaking to AnEsonGib during the week, and I said to him, "What do you get if you win?" And he sort of was like, "I'm not sure. I don't know." It seems like an obvious question, but he hadn't been asked it before. So yeah, I guess they're going to. I understand that you know, things are different now than they were at the start of the tournament. I understand that maybe the pay scale is a little bit different from what I've heard behind the scenes. But yeah, all the fighters are signed up. I mean, even Whindersson Nunes, it seems keen on doing a losers bracket fight with Jarvis. So, you know, it appears they've got, you know, the big stars, and if they can keep Whindersson, they've obviously got Gib versus Kenny back in Kenny's hometown with the whole beta squad behind them, who were great over the weekend, by the way. They really did deliver in terms of the entertainment on Saturday night with the whole Argentina gimmick, you know. So if you keep them, I mean, Gib, not really a great ticket seller, but, you know, King Kenny has the whole beta squad behind him. You got Whindersson, who's, you know, a big deal in with the Brazilians, Julie Poca involved. Barbie apparently has her own little niche fan base, so it should be, you know, a big event. Selling out the O2 is a tough ask for a show that didn't exactly sell out Wembley Arena. And, you know, the 3 Arena was not, it was full, but it wasn't full. Like they had the, you know, the curtain down. It just looks nicer in the 3 Arena because the curtain is shaped like a wall, but it was, you know, the O2 is a big ask. So we'll see how that goes in September. If they could get Wembley, I'm sure they probably should, because that's the more appropriate venue. But yeah, ideally, the final is going ahead. I've heard nothing to the contrary.
Let's just reflect on the men's semi-finals. We did have AnEsonGib up first against Jarvis. Harry, what were your thoughts? Again, you know, there weren't really any complaints at the end.
Yeah, well, this is probably one of the most exciting fights going into it, and straight from the bat, Jarvis actually had a pretty good opening round. I thought he came and landed the first blow of the fight, and when I saw that sort of good start from him, I actually did favour him, but Gib just proved too good for him, and I've also watched, I believe it was Daily Perales, other semi-final King Kenny, sort of just watching that fight back, Gib against Jarvis, and he's sort of laughing at Gib's performance, even though he had a pretty good win, saying, we're going to expose this guy in the final and whatever, but no, that one sort of lived up to the bill, and I was surprised that Gib sort of came onto his own in the fight, and he just proved too much for Jarvis, and I feel like a lot of people were expecting Jarvis's sort of, you know, experience with the Mayweather gym to prove, and his gas tank sort of went in the later rounds, and come the final round of that fight, it did look like Jarvis was just absolutely knackered, and maybe the more experienced Gib is just known how to pace himself more as the fight goes on. But going into that final with Gib and King Kenny, it's going to be a real interesting one, because again, King Kenny had a great performance, but for the Gib fight, it was one of probably the best wins Gib's had, because he showed really he's developed himself as a boxer who knows how to pace himself in these fights now.
And Donna, King Kenny's performance against Whindersson hailed as the best influencer boxing performance in the history of influencer boxing, which is about 5 years.
Yeah, no, he's in those 5 years that there has been influencer boxing, I haven't seen really domination like it. I mean, we've seen people get knocked out quickly. We've seen people get absolutely battered around. You know, my boy Anthony Taylor did great against Ashley Raksub, but, you know, in terms of the boxing ability, in terms of the movement, in terms of everything, what an incredible show from Kenny. You know, Winderson was kind of fancied beforehand. He'd been in the ring with some proper pros and all the rest of it, but he hadn't, you know, been tested like that. He hadn't been in there with a real live opponent who's trying to, you know, to really stop him. And Kenny just looked unbelievable. It all came together. Loads of signs of daily paralysis training, loads of stuff that you'd see from, you know, George Mitchell, Martin Foru in their fights. And as well, the only issue I have is the questions we had beforehand. What does Kenny look like under pressure? What does he look like if he gets a little cut? They weren't answered necessarily because he got nothing back from Al Winderson. Winderson seemed fairly happy to just be there. I understand, like, it wasn't about the money for Winderson. I understand that he's not even the highest paid in the tournament, but he just seemed happy to kind of be involved, and he didn't really seem to fancy it. He didn't seem to want to get into the exchanges. And, you know, I think we still haven't seen, like, what's going to happen to Kenny if he gets hit with a big one in the first round. You know what I mean? And so it makes for an interesting final, because Gib is the kind of guy who's going to get in and you know, make it dirty. And he didn't like it when it was dirty against Ashley Raksub back in that's only March. It's within this year. It's only he fights super regularly, but only 2 fights ago. So amazing performance. Like you say, the best we've seen in influencer boxing. Jake Paul hasn't had a better one. KSI hasn't had a better one. None of these, you know, superstars, the crossover guys who come over haven't had a better one. You haven't really seen, like, Chris Avila against Dr. Mike wasn't better than this. So, you know, it's really impressive what Kenny's been able to do. Started boxing 2 years ago, but let's see the pressure now from Gib. Let's see how Gib can change it up, because the blueprint is there to beat him. He's lost twice, and if Gib can use that, then it makes for a very interesting final.
Just touching on what Donna said, is I feel like a lot of people watching Winderson, given, you know, he looked so crisp and good in the first fight against Filipek, even us watching from ringside, we were kind of like, right, this round surely Winderson has to change something. It just seemed like from the first round, just something wasn't there, and I thought that would change. The rounds went on, but he was never really in the fight. And going on what Donna said, is a lot of people were thinking, oh, if Winderson can really stick it on him and, you know, maybe cut him or something, and he's leaking in his own sort of blood, then Kenny won't fancy it. And again, as much as Kenny's performance did look good, he was showboating around, just toying with Winderson the whole fight. It's almost like he's progressed to the finals, but we still don't know how he's going to do against, you know, someone, against facing adversity. So, as much as, not to, you know, sort of talk bad about the performance, but it's going into this final, and I still feel like there's going to be a lot of questions asked in this one for Kenny against Gib.
And is Gib the man to do that?
I don't know. I'm obviously, you know, with the Winderson fight, I wouldn't say obviously Kenny's going to have a size advantage, right? He's the longer guy, and you saw that fight with Winderson. He was just popping that uppercut, and it was just Winderson's head was getting pinged back the whole fight. With the Jarvis one, even if you look at Jarvis after the fight, he was a bit bruised up, but it's not like he was cut and bloodied. And I don't know. I think if Kenny can obviously make the improvements in 2 months that he's already made since April, which was phenomenal, I feel like he can do it. Daly was also saying he's never ever going to put someone in there who can't go in terms of cardio, and Kenny showed that his cardio is great. A lot of people were calling for this one to be 8 rounds with Kenny and Gib, and if that is, and going off Daly's coaching skills, I would favour Kenny to get it done, because I feel like, even though I'm speaking about the questions that are asked of Kenny, I feel like Gib is not the one to answer those questions. I feel like Kenny will sort of keep him at range and use the shots that we saw him use to effect against Winderson.
One thing that seemed to be missing last weekend, whether it was organisational, whether it was the fighters, was a face-off in the ring with King Kenny and Gib. I mean, that feels like it should have been a no-brainer.
Yeah, no, organizational. From the organization standpoint, it's an example of something that they really need to work on. You know, they kind of give these guys the run of the place. I know that Gib has a pretty hardcore warm down strategy. I actually ran into him right after his fight, and you know, he was over the moon. But I think that his warm downs are pretty severe. He gets, you know, a big massage, and there's all this different, you know, sports therapy for this superstar. AnEsonGib, this great boxer, really needs it. You know, so he, like, after the real war that he had with Jarvis, but I would think that the promoter should say, get a shower, get a shirt on, and sit out at ringside. Like, you have to, like, quickly. We've got a 5-minute break. Maybe if you count the ring walks, you got 10, 15 minutes. Get yourself showered, get a shirt. Maybe even don't get yourself showered. Maybe just pop something on and sit down at ringside and watch the fight and do the face-off, and then do all your stuff afterwards. I mean, I guess Chris is the promoter, or people from DAZN maybe should have been pretty stern on that. And it was definitely, I mean, it was pretty cringe when they start going, is Gib here? Is Gib here? No, he's not. That was a little weird. But yeah, like, other than that, it was a huge successful week for them. But yeah, that was a glaring omission.
Going on Donald, what Donna was saying is, all the sort of post-fight media, which I was crediting at the start of this, is Gib was the only one that we didn't have. So again, even we were asking where is Gib, but Kenny came back, Daly came back, and again in the women's one, we did have the face-off with Julie and Barbie. So I don't know if it was the organisation thing, or it's just Gib's intense massage and recovery and all this, like Donna was saying, for a high-end boxer. I don't know if it was that or something else, but we got Kenny and we got Daly and stuff, but we didn't get Gibbs. So that would have been nice to see them sort of size each other up, as I was saying there with the whole size thing. But we didn't get it, so maybe the first time we see them face off will be during fight week.
Okay, that was Kingpyn Boxing. We'll be back to talk about that later in the year. But for now, we're going to look ahead to the return of Misfits Boxing this weekend in Nashville. I'm just reading your preview, Donna, and it starts with, gimmicks are the name of the game this weekend. And it's hard to disagree. Lots of tag team, lots of things. Before we come to it, is this everything that's wrong with influencer boxing in the eyes of those who think influencer boxing is the worst thing to ever happen?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're a critic of the space, you just have to look at you just have to look at it on paper, I guess. But, the tag team worked out pretty well in Telford at the time. I think even boxing purists kind of found it was a bit of fun. They got very lucky that, Luis Pineda, who's a legitimate, journeyman professional, didn't just put a beating on these two beginners. I think it was Anthony. I couldn't even tell you the Anthony guy's name, but then Ice Poseidon was the other fella. And it was, it was a lot of fun, and B-Dave ended up getting the win. So, yeah, I mean, look, like, if you're a purist, it's not the look you're going for. I don't know what DAZN think of the whole thing, but this is what Mams Taylor is looking to do. He's looking to make influencer boxing something that isn't traditional boxing. It's something that incorporates all sorts of crossovers from, be it, the MMA world, where fighters come over from there who were maybe not successes, and then also, ideas from professional wrestling world, which Logan Paul has become a big star in, and now KSI as well. So if they're able to execute it, I mean, the Tennessee State Athletic Commission will be involved. So in some way, shape, or form, they've obviously approved whatever the rule set is for this Survivor tag. We'll see how that works out. And yeah, I think it makes for something interesting. But yeah, the purists are not going to be a fan. The week after the whole Daniela Hemsley thing, rough couple of weeks maybe, if you're trying to defend influencer boxing to the purists.
Run me through how the main event's going to work.
Okay, yeah, well, how much time have you got? It's going to take me longer to explain it than it's going to take for the fight to happen, but basically they do a social media poll which confirms who the first two people are, and then it's essentially a tag team match, but if you get stopped, you're out, but the fight isn't over. So, like, you saw Ice Poseidon got stopped in the last one, and that's it. Him and his teammate are done. Similar thing, except there's four of them. You've got Swarms, you've got B-Dave, you've got Ryan Johnston, and then you've got this Nick Lamau. A lot of household names in the main event, and then you get, I guess if no one gets eliminated, then I guess they go to scores at that point. If you don't participate, you get a 9 automatically in the 10-point must system. It's going to be very confusing if they don't get the stoppages they're looking for. But otherwise, yeah, I would love to explain it further, except it's kind of confusing to me as someone who's supposed to be covering it. I'll have to see how it works on the night. But yeah, essentially, it's a tag team match which we saw in March, work out okay. And when someone gets stopped, they are eliminated.
Okay. There is also another tag team match, I believe, which is a normal one, which also includes a mystery opponent, which is another feature of Misfits Boxing. But there are some legitimate fighters. Can I say that? Yeah. On the card, Harry, we do Anthony Taylor, more known for MMA, of course, and Hasim Rahman Jr., son of Hasim Rahman, who, of course, was supposed to fight Jake Paul last year, and sort of switched over from legitimate professional boxing to this scene. So it's a card and an event that's very much, I feel, is gone under the radar, but there are a few pockets of interest.
I feel like, honestly, as someone who, again, like Donna's the sort of expert at this space. So I'm glad you didn't ask me how the tag team thing worked, because I was like, I have no idea. However, saying that, I feel like the undercard is actually more exciting. Anthony Taylor, Paul Bamba, that's a real one which is going to sort of capture the whole attention of this space. Because, again, shout out Donna's boy Anthony Taylor. It's going to be a good one, but I'm more interested in Hasim Rahman Jr. against Alan Belcher. Alan Belcher, for those who don't know, who are MMA nuts like me, UFC veteran, fought the likes of Michael Bisping, and obviously Rahman Jr., like you said, they were supposed to fight Jake Paul last year. Two sort of big guys, and Hasim obviously had that loss to Greg Hardy recently, and he's sort of looking to sort of really get some relevancy in this space after being talked about so long, but actually not being known for fighting with the whole Jake Paul cancellations. So given that, and obviously you got, I believe, Unbear is fighting as well. He actually swam out recently in like the River Thames with a banner of the fight and had to get rescued after almost drowning in the sea. So some great but risky maybe promotion for this event. So Alex Steen on there, who's an American politician. So with all this sort of talk about the tag team, I feel like we should actually be focusing on the undercard, because like you said, Martin, there's some actual good and legitimate fighters competing on this, and I know Donna probably has a lot to say and could double the length of this podcast speaking probably about the AT and Paul Bamba fight, right, Donna?
Well, are you aware, Martin, of the feud that I have with Paul Bamba going at the moment?
I'm not sure I want to know, Donna. I don't want to get us in trouble.
He's so because of my friendship with Anthony, he has banned me on all social media, unfollowed me on Instagram, unfollowed me on Twitter. He DM'd me and said if I contact him anymore, it's harassment. He's had it with me in the build-up to this fight because I dare to be friends with Anthony Taylor. He's, Paul Bamba. I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds like I'm biased now, but he's up against it. He had Chris Avila beat Anthony Taylor by majority decision, which indicates an incredibly close fight that could have gone either way. And Chris Avila fairly pieced up Paul Bamba in their last fight. So obviously boxing mats doesn't always work like that, but it's certainly like, I'm not just saying it because, Anthony's a friend of mine, but it is an uphill battle for Paul. And then, when it comes to Hasim Rahman Jr., you've got, we were discussing this during the weekend, Harry. Like this time last year, he was preparing to headline Madison Square Garden against Jake Paul, and now he's third from the start, second from the start against Alan Belcher on the undercard of the Survivor tag in Nashville. It's been an interesting year for Hasim Rahman Jr. So he should be favored in the fight. He's the legitimate boxer against the MMA fighter, the bare knuckle boxer. But yeah, like you say, there's a lot of actual interest on this card. Alex Stein, hilarious comedian and political pundit as well, who I'm sure has the backing of some big people. So yeah, Jorge Masvidal was involved in his training, I believe. So yeah, lots of interesting fights on this card. The Happy Punch prelims are the card to watch. You got Umber, you got Mo Dean, you got Alex Stein, you got all these superstars, and of course Korn, the Twitter superstar. So, I think the Happy Punch prelims is what you got to watch, and it's all free on YouTube, from what I know.
Donna's not paid by Happy Punch. We should just say that. To be fair, I think we milked Paul Bamba for everything we could after the Tommy Fury debacle. So you know what? That's fine. I'm happy to move on. And move on from this podcast as well. We will be back next week with a look back at what promises to be a chaotic event, if nothing else, in Nashville with Misfits Boxing. Their 8th one, the first one since KSI beat Joe Forney and then didn't beat Joe Forney. back in May. We've had to talk about that, and I believe we may also have a few minutes to talk about Astrid Wet. I'll leave that with you, and I do hope you can join us next week.